KKHT wants you to meet three of the classiest guys in real estate.
I am Chris Kelso, the maestro of mortgage.
I am Rob Cook, the godfather of real estate.
And I'm Joe Orsack, the king of credit swing. And together, we're
the Real Estate Rat Pack.
Much like us, real estate right now is smoking hot. So whether it's buying, selling, or owning, you need to check out the Real Estate Rat Pack.
They're here to take your calls and answer your questions live. Call now, 1-800-808-5548. And now, the Real Estate Rat Pack!
Welcome. Good morning, everybody. It's a great morning to be here on a Saturday morning with all of our great crew and our Real Estate Rat Pack in the studio. Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing great this morning, Chris. How are you?
I am doing very well. We got an exciting show today, right, Joe?
Absolutely. Crazy exciting.
Crazy exciting. You know, one of the things that we always talk about all the time is how Washington and how everything that's going on in Washington can impact our local market. And so we have a very exciting show today about how that's truly impacting everything. You know, Joe, you have a very special guest we're going to start off with today, and I want you to introduce him if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to bring on the Governmental Affairs Chair for the National Association of Mortgage Brokers, Mr. John Hudson. John, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, buddy, we're glad to have you on the air. Thank you for calling in from the second greatest city in the state.
And where would that be?
You're calling in from San Antonio, right?
San Antonio, yes, sir.
Beautiful. You're in the greatest state, so that's all that matters.
That is true.
Well, welcome.
I think my lucky stars every day I'm from Texas.
There you go.
I agree.
Hey, John, give us a little background on yourself. You know, I gave you the brief intro, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing on the NAMB.
Well, I tell you what, guys, first of all, thanks again for the opportunity to be here today. About me, well, I tell you what, I'm one of these passionate guys in the mortgage business that's been doing this for about 14 years now. Started out as just a little intern, and now I'm the area manager for Premier Nationwide Lending. We're a $2 billion a year mortgage bank that serves Central and South Texas, and that's my territory, and we're happy to be able to out there and serve a bunch of homeowners in the state. With NAMB, I'd actually just resigned my post as the government affairs chair because I'm fixing to have a baby, so promised my wife I wouldn't be traveling as much.
Wow.
But
Congratulations.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. But as the government affairs chair for NAMB, I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., trying to help our regulators and our legislators understand some of the consequences or unintended consequences from some of the regulation and legislation that's being proposed or being enacted currently. You know, primarily my biggest fear is that too much regulation is going to wind up harming the consumer and making it more and more difficult for people out there to participate in truly what is the greatest wealth generation tool that we have in this country, and that is home ownership. I'll put it bluntly, and I'm not just reading this from a tagline, but I truly believe that the greatest tool we do have for wealth creation is through home ownership. I'm not talking about Flip This House, because let's face it, we all should have known that the end of the world was coming when Flip This House was a TV show. But I'm talking about, long-term property ownership that can be passed down from generation to generation. And without having that opportunity, there's a lot of consumers out there that are never going to have that chance to move up. So what I want to do is make sure that people do have that chance, that they do have the opportunity to participate in the American dream.
Well, you know, and one of the things, this is Chris, by the way, you know, being a coworker, or more importantly, a co-conspirator, as I like to say, within the mortgage industry, one of the things I want you to let everybody know is sort of what's going on out there that's impacting mortgages and home ownership in today's marketplace right now.
Well, probably the topic du jour and the one that really is going to have an impact, not right away, but it's coming, and that is what's known as the qualified mortgage. When Dodd-Frank was enacted, they wanted to make sure that consumers can repay a loan. I mean, let's face it, during the heyday of the housing boom, lenders were out there promoting home products that, really didn't require too much underwriting. So there were a lot of borrowers that were able to get home loans that, quite frankly, they shouldn't have. So Dodd-Frank is passed, and now we want to make sure that, lenders are actually underwriting. Well, the way that the law and the regulation is being enacted will actually have a, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Let's face it, credit is already tight for consumers. The industry is already only underwriting as what we like to call loans that people could pay back. So now with this new regulation and legislation that's going to be enacted, credit is going to get even tighter. And I'll just give you a quick little example. Right now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're average FICO scores are in the 760s, which, let's face it, y'all are the credit guys. Y'all are the credit experts. I mean, 760 is a pretty good score. The average FICO for a declined loan in today's market is a 706, which, let's face it, that's still a pretty decent credit score, and that's still higher than, I believe, the average FICO for the state of Texas. So, you can kind of get a little bit of an idea of how tight credit is. Well, when the qualified mortgage comes out, what it's going to enact is tighter debt-to-income requirements, which may or may not be necessarily bad. It's going to eliminate certain products that, let's face it, consumers should still have access to certain products, and I can get into some of the details there if needed. And probably the most detrimental, though, that I foresee is what they're calling for a 3% cap on points and fees. Well, on the outset, hey, let's face it, 3% cap on points and fees, well, that sounds reasonable, right? Well, when you start getting into the details and the definitions of what's included in that 3% cap, then you'll start to find that it's very easy for a lender to hit that 3% cap by what's included in the law. Now, let's face it, this isn't 3% that a borrower is paying out of their own pocket. No, this is all back-end charges and whatnot. So, really, who's going to be impacted the most there is definitely going to be borrowers that are getting lower loan amounts, which typically are your first-time home buyers, which typically are people that just, they can't afford, the $300,000 dream home, but people that just simply want to buy a starter home. So, I'm just afraid that too much regulation or too much legislation will have an unintended consequence. And, well, let's face it, keep people from having an opportunity to buy a house.
And, I want to talk a little bit about that to the average listener out there. One of the things that we talk about in regards to a qualified mortgage means the following. For example, most mortgage companies, all the fees are usually standard. An appraisal fee, let's say, is between $350 and $400. Processing fees, same thing. There's a lot of fees that are absolutely the same. Well, under this 3% rule, what happens is, and I'll give you an example, a $50,000 loan in today's market and a $500,000 loan in today's market is going to have the same processing fee, is going to have the same appraisal fee, is going to have several of the same fees. Guess what? 3% of $500,000 is a lot different than 3% of $50,000. So what ends up happening is, and this is where the concern is coming in, is a lot of these lower cost loans or these lower price loans, it's not because the lender wants to charge more, it's just because those are the fees associated with doing a loan are now going to be impacted, and you're going to see that there's going to be struggle to obtain those loans because most lenders can't do them or don't want to do them because of that regulation.
That is so absolutely true. And the other part of what's included in this 3% cap, and this, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this for the average listener that's out there, is one of the charges that is to be included in this 3% is compensation to a mortgage broker entity. And I know that sounds kind of bizarre, but I'm trying to think. If you have two identical loans, one loan is funded and it goes through underwriting, or both loans get through underwriting and they both get down to ready to release docs and papers and get ready to close on that mortgage, well, by the compensation to the mortgage broker entity being included, might kick that loan out of being a qualified mortgage. And meanwhile, a mortgage banker, which still has that same compensation, however, it's not disclosed, because it's not disclosed, is not going to hit that 3% cap. So you definitely have an instance here where, by default, a government regulation is going to have a detrimental impact to small business entities, when these are mortgage companies that still have to pay the same rent, phone bill, fax bill, overhead, et cetera, that a mortgage banker does. Which, by the way, and I'm just going to throw this out there, too, that just the other day, the CFPB, that is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, one of the large agencies created through Dodd-Frank, released their consumer complaint database, which there were over 90,000 complaints in there, over 50,000 of which were mortgage-related. They had a category in there called Originator Application Mortgage Broker, which had approximately 3,500 complaints in that category. Well, I'm kind of a data nerd here, and I actually went through and pulled the data, and through a search, I found that only 22 of that 3,500 that was in there were actually mortgage brokers.
Big number.
Yeah, big number is right. And so I just want to throw it out there to the consumer that don't be quick to judge, that or buy in that, it's mortgage brokers are bad. I tell every consumer out there that, I don't care who you get a mortgage from, but just make sure that you find the person that you like, that you trust, somebody that, I think it's better to find somebody local that you could actually go to their office and sit down and talk to, somebody that can really hold your hand, because let's face it, getting a mortgage today requires a lot of hand-holding and a lot of navigation, whether you're the first-time home buyer or whether you're the sophisticated borrower that's had multiple homes in the past. Getting a mortgage today is not what it was getting a mortgage a couple years ago.
John, this is Rob here. Good morning.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm doing great. Listen, we've been following Dodd-Frank and its intricacies for some time now, and I know that you're in Washington often and talking to legislators. And when you talk to our legislators, what's their reaction to this when they realize what the unintended consequences? This is one of those things where let's pass it and then we'll find out what's in it type of thing.
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. Once we actually get the opportunity to sit down and go over some of these scenarios or unintended consequences from Dodd-Frank with the congressman or their staffer, they sit there and kind of scratch their head and they go, "Really? Are you serious? That's going to happen?" And so they kind of understand here that, okay, well, that's not good for the consumer. Hey, in the grand scheme of things, yes, Dodd-Frank did do some good and create some consumer protections. It's also going to have a detrimental impact. So a lot of legislators do want to find a way to fix it. The problem that we run into is ultimately that, and mind you, this is both, Republicans and Democrats that I've visited with, both understand that there's definitely some unintended consequences that need to be fixed. The problem is I think that more of just a general observation that Washington, D.C. really does fall into the partisan politics. And it's unfortunate because whether you've got good ideas coming from either side of the aisle, it's going to be very difficult to get pushed through simply because they're on opposite ends of the aisle. Now, our organization was helpful in getting a bill proposed and dropped called H.R. 1077, called the Consumer Mortgage Choice Act. And this bill, and we do have bipartisan support on it so far through the House of Representatives, through Congress. This bill would help clarify some of the things that are in this 3% cap on points and fees. Ultimately, we want to make sure that a borrower is not going to pay out of pocket more than 3% on that points and fees. But at the same time, this bill is going to make sure that we have a level playing field for different business entities, that we're going to make sure that escrow charges are not included in that 3%. So a lot of the Congress people that we've spoken to so far, they want to support this bill, and I think we're going to be able to get it passed through the House of Representatives.
John, we're coming up against a break right now. We appreciate it very much. All those listening, you can call us at 800-808-5548. Want to hear from you. If you're a mortgage banker, mortgage broker, or just a consumer wants to know a little bit more about the government and regulatory affairs going on, give us a call. But we're going on a break. We'll be right back.
My head keeps spinning. I go to sleep and keep grinning. Oh, the shark, babe, has such teeth, dear, and it shows them pearly white.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. Man, it is so much fun being here in studio and talking about all these good stuff. More importantly, things that our consumers, that our listeners can actually listen to and get some good information as to what's impacting their industry, our industry, buying, selling, and owning real estate. Remember, we're going to hear from you. You can call us at 800-808-5548. One of the things, we have a very nice guest here in the studio, which I'm going to have Rob introduce to us. But one of the things before we get to her is I also want, after Rob to introduce her, for let us know a little bit about what's going on with a non-for-profit organization that is very near and dear to your heart. So, Rob, who do we have here with us?
We have Christi Borden, who's with Better Homes and Gardens, Gary Green, and one of my favorite people on the planet, and I usually refer to her as the effervescent Christi Borden. And, when you want to get something done, you hand it to a busy person, and she is absolutely a busy person. Welcome this morning, Christi.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
And we appreciate you being on board. One of the things I want you to tell everybody about right now is obviously your participation with the Sunshine Kids and actually the Katy Sunshine Festival that's going on next weekend.
Yes, we're very excited. This is the 7th year for my firm and the Katy office to hold the Katy Sunshine Fest. And this started as a kind of a small party. We had about 300 folks attend, and this year we're hoping to have about 1,500. And it's held on next Saturday evening, 5:30 to 9:30, and it's actually held in a huge steel-erected tent, about 8,000 square feet under the big top in Katy. And it's invitation only, but we're not charging entrance, so someone just needs to contact us for a ticket because we just need to be able to register who's attending. But what it does is it raises money for the Sunshine Kids, which was founded here in Houston by a candy striper. And the organization, and you can look it up, it's sunshinekids.org, but it's a fantastic organization that just brings joy and happiness to children undergoing treatment for cancer. And I've recently met parents of kids who have been involved in it. And I can tell you the parents actually feel that the Sunshine Kids have been a lifesaver as much as the medical research that has gone into their treatment, because you put them with other kids undergoing what they're going through, and there's just so much joy and happiness. And they do find healing through that.
You know, one of the things we say all the time is in this market, we all love what we do in regards to real estate and the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. We love talking about it, but guess what? We also love what it affords us to do to help children and other organizations out, to give, like you said, these children an excitement and a happiness, and their families an opportunity to get through something that can sometimes be quite terrifying and quite an ordeal, to be honest with you. So we really appreciate you giving that out. All those who are listening out there, remember, it's the Katy Sunshine Festival. You can go to katysunshinefest.org. You can also contact Christi to get information and, more importantly, to get into it right there.
And Christi, how can they get a hold of you?
You can contact me on my cell, 832-368-5953. You can also Google me, Christi Borden. I'm kind of all over Google. And you can email me at christi@christiborden.com.
That is awesome. Well, getting back to regulatory affairs right now, Joe, we have another one of your guests you want to bring in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to bring in Mr. Randall Chesnutt, who is currently the president of our industry association, NACSO, which is the National Association of Credit Service Organizations, to talk about some of the stuff that's going on in Washington on the credit side. So, Randall, are you there?
I'm here, Joe.
All right. Randall, you're calling in from windy Chicago.
Yes, not so windy today, thank God.
Good morning, Randall.
Good morning. How you doing?
All right. Well, so, Randall, if you would, tell us a little for the listener out there that's tuning into the show and has no clue what all these acronyms mean. Can you tell us a little bit about NACSO and what's the point of NACSO?
Sure. First, let me start off by thanking you, Rob, Joe, and Chris for such a great show and allowing me to speak on behalf of NACSO today.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. To answer your question, NACSO is an acronym, stands for National Association of Credit Service Organizations. I know that's a mouthful. Basically, that's the term that the government has given the credit repair industry. There's an act that actually regulates that particular industry. I know a lot of people have questions about the legitimacy of the credit repair industry, so we can put that to rest, that they wouldn't have created an act to regulate it if it wasn't legitimate. So
Gotcha.
Start with that. Kind of background on me, I started a business called Improve My Credit USA about our fifth year, going into our fifth year, with the sole purpose of building communities, and we felt that credit was a big part of that. So we delved into, what's the problem with credit and what's going on, and eventually expanded it out to me joining this association, see how we could help improve the overall experience for customers in dealing with credit repair companies.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Randall, I want you to hang on. We have another caller coming in.
Okay.
So we've got a few folks on the line here, so we're going to keep you on the line because we've got some stuff we want to come back to about what's going on with FICO scoring.
Yes.
So hang on just 1 second with us. We've got Richard from Dallas that's calling in, and Richard has a question for us. So, Richard, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Actually, I had more of a comment than a question.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I just wanted to let you guys know I'm calling from Dallas, so now you have a statewide audience. I love shows that help educate the public and the real estate agents. So far, I think you guys are doing a great job. I'm in the real estate business up here, but I did used to live in the Houston area. I found out about it on Facebook, and I've liked your page today.
Wonderful.
I'm very, very impressed with what I've heard so far, and I think you guys are doing a good job. And it's great that you guys take time to help educate, like I said, not only the consumers, but also the real estate agents out there who really need to embrace shows like this because it's a great opportunity to learn. And so thanks a lot, and keep up the good work.
Well, we appreciate your comment. Makes us feel very good about what we're doing, because that's exactly what we want to do, is just meet consumers and realtors about things that are occurring in the market, and a lot of people are just unaware of it.
I would absolutely agree. And one of the things you said, and for all of our listeners, definitely want to encourage you, go out to Facebook, like our page, the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. We definitely want to build that up, because what we're trying to do, and we've said this from day one, deliver you great information, great information for you to take, whether you are in the industry or you're a consumer. You can take that and utilize that to better not only yourself, but the real estate experience.
Well, I tell you, when I'm waking up at 7 in the morning on a Saturday to get prepped to drive 30 miles across town, it's calls like that make getting up a little easier.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so could you call in again next week?
Yeah, so can you call again next week, Richard? We can just hear from you every week. He absolutely hit the nail on the head. That is the heart behind this show. We are a bunch of hams, and we're silly and all that sort of thing, and tongue-in-cheek with the whole Rat Pack motif. And, Rob, you can't see him here, but he's sitting here with his tuxedo shirt on.
It's a classic.
Yes, we're going to get some of those made. Actually,
you'll be able to look on Facebook and
Christi,
see the way Rob is dressed.
Take a picture of Rob here in the shirt. We're going to post it on Facebook so you guys can check out Rob in his tuxedo shirt. We're silly. We're having a lot of fun with it, but the heart behind this show is absolutely to provide our listeners, and as you so aptly reminded us, our statewide audience, what is going on with the buying, selling, and owning of real estate, all the things that impact that process. So without further ado, I want to get back to Randall. Randall, are you there?
I'm still here.
Good. Okay. So wanted to jump in. There's a lot going on in Washington specifically related to credit. Recently in the news, there's been a lot of press about a new Vantage score. And Chris and I were talking about this off air earlier. If there wasn't enough confusion going on to begin with credit scores, now they've got a lot of press about this new Vantage score. And he was telling me he had customers coming in making comments about seeing how they were going to change scoring and all this sort of thing. And he was having to explain how the mortgage industry really didn't look at that deal. Can you educate our listeners a little bit about what's going on in Washington as it relates to the credit scoring and that type of thing?
Sure. To back up, I think your previous caller had brushed over the consumer group called the CFPB, or Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yes, John.
John. Their very first order of business was to do a study on the different scoring models that were out there for consumers, and how detrimental it is for the consumer and how it negatively affects their way of life. Because there's more than just Vantage score. And for those people who don't know what that is, it's actually, a lot of people don't realize that the score that is generated by a mortgage or a car or someone in that financial sector is produced by a company called Fair Isaac Company. The FICO is their acronym. And they're actually a total separate company from the Bureau. Now, the Vantage score, the credit bureaus would like for you to purchase their credit score. So you've got actually the FICO software is stored on the credit bureau's computers, so that when they call for that consumer's information, it actually runs through that FICO algorithm and generates a score. Now, when a consumer sees it and it says TransUnion and their score is whatever, it's 600, that score was actually generated running that information through the FICO scoring, and it generates a score that the mortgage or whoever you're trying to get a loan through. Now, as a consumer, we go online and we see many offers for, freecreditreport.com and several of these other ones. I don't know if I was allowed to say that or not, but
well, you just did.
Yeah,
we do have a 7-second delay, so maybe we can get that off.
Yeah, could you please? Now, although these aren't totally bad, the scores are basically useless. The information that's provided on the score is useful for a consumer to see whether the information is accurate or even theirs. And then if they have alerts, if someone pulled their credit. So there's some value in the online, but the score itself has no bearing on whether someone like Chris would give you a loan or not. So we've got some huge confusion. Of course, the credit bureaus would love to sell their credit scoring model to the mortgage industry instead of having to pay for the FICO score. So then there's many different credit scores. There's Vantage Plus and there's Score Plus, and we could just go down the line. And all of those have their own. Someone comes to you and says they had a 900 credit score, you know that that's not a FICO score.
Hey, right. Randall, we're going to continue this conversation right after the break. For all those listening, we are up against a break. Again, feel free to reach us at 800-808-5548. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
A planet might be born, maybe even a galaxy.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. We hope y'all are enjoying everything and all the news and content out there. Let's get back and speak to Randall. Randall was going in regards to the different scoring models and mechanisms. Randall, you back on there?
I'm still here, Chris.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, but keep on going. We're talking sort of what's going on in the consumers, and more importantly, some of the changes and the misinformation, I guess, sometimes in regards to what those scoring models look like and what is truly available to the consumer out there.
Right. Well, just to shorten it up, Chris, going to Washington, speaking with regulators and the legislators, and people like Corey Stone over at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we just want some consistency for the consumers, that when a consumer pulls a score and they're sitting at home, that score is going to be the same score that's going to be based on their purchase decision, whether they're going to get it or not. That's our high bid order. And I think that there's a lot of push towards that. If you've watched the media here lately, there's been a lot of talk about the credit bureaus and a lot of talk about, that's the scoring model and how it is so confusing for a consumer who gets excited about their credit score when they pull it off of one of these named websites that can generate a consumer credit score, and they are excited and they go to visit someone like yourself, and now you have to be the deliverer of bad news that they can't currently purchase something, and that never feels good.
Right, and you're absolutely right. Most consumers, and for all of our listeners out there, a consumer-based credit report is different than a mortgage-based credit report. The reason why, the algorithms are set up differently. And then even within the credit scoring models, you have Fair Isaac, you have, obviously, the Vantage, which is the newer one coming out there. So you also have different scoring models. So individuals are really confused as to sometimes what their credit truly looks like. And I think you're right. I think getting to a point in which we can have some more consistent scoring models across the board would really help not only us in our industry, but across the board in every industry, whether it be buying an automobile, finding a job, getting a mortgage, or anything in between.
Right, Chris. I mean, if we can get to that point, it's much easier to educate a consumer off of a commonality. Where you have one consumer say, hey, my credit is fine, and they go about their day-to-day and never realize why maybe their insurance is more expensive than it was the year prior, not knowing that maybe it's caused because of their credit, and they thought that their credit was good because they looked at it on one of these websites,
online
consumer
services.
scores, online service.
Shameless plug for NACSO here, but also NAMB with John on the line. I think this for the consumer. This is why it is so important that the professionals you work with to do a little homework, because there's so many in our industry. There's so many credit repair companies who could give a flip less what's going on in Washington and what's coming down the pike that's going to affect the consumer. So Randall, as my business partner, but also just as a person that's concerned about what's happening to the consumer, is in Washington on the consumer's behalf, trying to make sure that stuff that, all these different credit scores that confuse the heck out of everybody, that we have something that makes sense and works for the consumer. And that's the same thing with John on the other line. It's he's doing the same thing in the mortgage industry, fighting on the consumer's behalf to make sure that we have things that make sense coming down the pipe and not just Big Brother telling us, what's best for all of us.
I would absolutely agree. And speaking of that, so far we've addressed credit, we've addressed mortgage, but there's another major segment that all this impacts, right, Rob?
Absolutely. Texas, the greatest state in the union, in its infinite wisdom, has a part-time legislature. They are in session this year, and they've put forward already 6,000 bills, 2,000 of which impact real estate. And we track that, and a lot of people do not know what realtors do to help protect private property rights. And Christi, I invited Christi specifically to come talk about that. She is what we call a TREPAC trustee. TREPAC is Texas Real Estate Political Action Committee. And part of her job is to be aware of it, communicate the issues that consumers can be facing that are going to impact their private property right.
It's
really careful how I say that. And so, Christi, I'm looking at, I've got some paper in front of me that's talking about we have like 15 different issues that were impacted, and each one of those issues could be a show on itself. So let's talk about.
We're going to cover each one in depth.
and if you're at home, please get out your notepads.
And I brought a sleeping bag, so I'm ready.
So anyway, in your estimation, tell me, what are the biggest issues facing us right now?
Well, I think after coming through that recent drought, we all know that water is so crucial, and it's actually a worldwide issue. But I think water is going to be on the forefront of the minds of every legislator this year. And, of course, water impacts not only the residents we have, but our projected growth in Texas. They're looking at expanding at almost doubling our population in Texas in the next 50 years. So we've got to have enough water for them, and it impacts folks here in Galveston and Houston and the folks up in Amarillo whose reservoirs are drying up, and the folks in El Paso and everywhere in the state. We have water issues, whether you're sitting on a lake or high and dry on the plains. So that's the number one issue, I think. Funding, of course, we're looking at another shortfall and how to make appropriate cuts, and taxes are going to be, a part of that as well. So we've got a lot of big issues this year.
Well, and with the funding is, we have a amendment to our Constitution that requires us to have a balanced budget, which we have done. And we always proudly talk about our $2 billion rainy day fund. However, they're already looking at how can we spend that money and where can we get other sources of revenues. And one of the things that always comes up, and it seems like every legislative year, they come up and say, let's tax real estate again. And they do it with a transfer tax on services and stuff. So can you address that, Christi?
Well, certainly, and we can look to other states that have actually allowed these things to happen. One of the things that drives the economy, I feel, of course, is a healthy real estate market. There may be some that argue that maybe a healthy economy leads the real estate market. I think it's the other way around. I think if you look historically, when you've had a healthy real estate market in our country, we have thrived as a nation. And so anything that impacts that industry, yeah, it's my paycheck. So I know some people are thinking that I might have a little bias in here, but I can tell you that anything that slows down the movement of home ownership will impact the economy, because every home that it's bought, there are studies that show that people spend an average of $60,000 on area businesses and furniture and movers and painters and landscapers. So there's more than just the actual transaction. So we have fought very hard to keep sales tax off of home purchases. It's on the cards right now. We always look and we go tax, title, and license. What does that add up to? Imagine if you tack on a sales tax onto the already 8 to 10% seller fees and then buyer fees of 2 to 3% to close a transaction. You could literally add on $50,000 onto a $400,000, $500,000 home purchase. Who's going to bear that cost? Well, it's going to be the consumer. And that means that the buyers are not going to move as often, sellers are not going to sell as often, and that will slow down the real estate market, which has shown will slow down the economy.
Yeah,
right.
Well, we know that real estate will lead us and did lead us out of the recession. There's just no doubt about it. And we're in a really brisk market right now. In fact, we have a shortage of homes to sell. So you sellers out there, please, let's get them on the market. Let's get
Call
them sold
your
quick.
Realtor today.
We're getting offers over list price, and Christi works out in the Katy area, and she deals a lot with the oil executives and things like that. And these properties are getting $30,000 and $40,000 over asking price. So please put your home on the market. Let's go back to the real estate tax. They're talking about tax on services, and a lot of people said, well, gosh, you realtors are just out there protecting your own interest. And I want to add that when you bought those beautiful earrings, Christi, or your husband bought them for you, as he should, who paid the sales tax on that?
The consumer.
Yes. This is a tax that they're going to add on to at 8.25% onto your services. It's not just real estate services.
Well, it's professional services, it's attorneys, and just all across the board. And again, that's just one of the things that we're fighting, because there are other places to look for this money. And I just feel that we are vigilant to make sure that the consumer is not bearing the brunt. The homeowner in Texas is not bearing the brunt of this tax. And they will be, and they're already bearing the property tax. We're just it's not equitable. And also, one more thing, anytime you have a consumer-based consumption tax, if the economy slows down, consumers slow down consumption, means that tax goes down. How do you make up that shortfall? It is not consistent. It is not long-term viable.
Well, just let me say, as a I'm in the credit industry, and it is connected to real estate, but I'm not a realtor and I'm not a mortgage person, so I'm not directly involved in that sense. So just let me say that as a consumer, I don't care who's fighting tax being added on to something. I love that. So government is in this constant mode of where can we find more money via taxation. It's such a backwards concept. If it was how can we increase business? How can we increase a thriving economy? And the very nature of that will increase the income coming in to the government. So to me, it's the cart
before the
Thank
horse.
you. I couldn't say it.
Well,
Yes.
the other thing I tell everybody to look at is look at the most thriving state and city in the nation right now. What are some of the factors it has that contribute to success? Number one, as you mentioned right there, home values have, because of what we have in regards to our rules to home equity cash outs, limited 80%. Well, we don't have any taxation in regards to the sale of a property. So look at all the things that have helped us get to where we are today. Then go and look at the states who are now suffering from a real estate perspective. And they have all the things in place they are trying to put on top of us. Why would we want to follow in the footsteps of an unsuccessful way of doing business?
Well,
Right.
Entirely too logical.
I want to toss something. We're up against a break here, and we're going to be going out. But on that note, you mentioned we're a thriving economy here, and consequently, people are flocking to Houston in record droves, which translates to cruddy traffic. So
that's my next subject.
So I want to touch on that when we come back.
When we come back, to all those listening, call us. We want to hear from you. 800-808-5548. We're up against a break right now. We'll be right back.
I live in a tiny closet, a lukewarm cold water.
And we are back. Remember the number to call in. It's 800-808-5548. We are talking with Christi Borden with Better Homes and Gardens, Gary Green. And we're talking about regressive taxes. And then on the break, we had some discussions about what happens to other states. And my concern is always when they introduce a tax, they said, oh, it's only this much. They usually did that with the transfer tax. It's only $45, $50. This is the camel's nose under the tent. Because once they have it established, they can go up on it. And so let's address...
And the toll road is only going to be for a little while until
it's paid off.
Right.
And it will never be paid off. So we've got some other issues coming up. We were talking about specifically about infrastructure quite a bit. And transportation is going to be huge. So, Christi, address that.
Yes, and it's a very much concern to my business personally because I work in one of the largest suburbs of Houston, and a lot of folks move out to the suburbs for quality of life, but then they have to drive into work. And so this happens, of course, all over the state. And if we're going to double our population, we've got to figure out how to get these people from here to there safely. And one of the things that's interesting is maintenance and capacity for highways have been funded through the past through bond proceeds. Today, all proceeds for bonding are exhausted, and next year in 2014, this funding will decline by 50%. So something that people need to realize is funding of our transportation ways is a must. It's something we have to address. And the Texas Realtors, we support a statewide multimodal transportation system that facilitates safe and efficient movement of people. And we also are looking at all non-education diversions from the gas tax that should cease, and that's a big issue too, that the money's not going where it was initially intended.
They've been robbing the DOT for years.
They have been. And then we also would like the Texas Transportation Commission to ensure, accountability and transparency and public involvement. So there's been a big disconnect, I think, between the consumer and that commission. So transportation is on the mind of anyone moving to big cities, and but it does impact the entire state.
And, one of the things about transportation, we've seen, obviously, what's been going on. We have I-10 over the years has had a great amount of expansion. Of course, now it's packed all over again because of what's going on. We obviously have the new Grand Parkway that's going in, but we have to continue to see that development of infrastructure. It cannot stop. Houston's been very good up to this point, but if you think about what you talked about right now, a 50% reduction in available funds as of next year, that can have a huge impact if we don't do something about it as a city and as a consumer who has best vested interest in us continuing to grow.
Right. We have got to ensure that the Texas Transportation Commission has a constant and sustainable funding source for our transportation in the state, which does not exist at this point.
Do they know what they're proposing to fund that, or are they just talking about it?
They're just talking about it. We're actually going to be visiting the Hill on the 9th of April. The Texas Realtors will be visiting with all our legislators and presenting our priorities for them and explaining why it impacts consumers, how it impacts their constituents, their voting constituents. And so that will be we'll have more information then.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. It's April 9th. It's a Tuesday. It's what we call Realtor Lobby Day, and it's a pretty amazing thing to watch. We'll have 7 buses alone come from Houston. These are all volunteers, people taking off from their busy schedules to go to the Capitol, and they talk to each of the legislatures that impact their markets. And so we'll have about 2,000 realtors from around the state.
We're hoping 3 this year. We're hoping for 3.
That'd be wonderful. And, of course, when the legislators are there and they see 3,000 realtors come in, all with a single voice. Because when we go through these issues, we say these are the things that are important to property rights. And so we go in with a single voice, and they hear the message over and over again.
And Rob, what most people do not realize is there is no other consumer advocate for private property rights but what we call the Realtor Party. And we are not aligned to any particular political party. We simply focus on things that impact our consumers, our clients, homeowner rights across the state of Texas and across the nation.
You know, I had a complaint just this week, and it was from a realtor, and they said, boy, these homeowners associations have gotten out of control. And I noticed that is one of our issues this year. Give me the position on what the realtors are saying on that.
Well, what's interesting is actually there was major legislation in 82nd 2 years ago, and they really did a nice overhaul. They didn't fix everything, but they did a lot more than we actually thought they would get done in tightening up HOAs. And you know, people that don't live in a community with an HOA, they're really not impacted by it. But HOAs are originally there just to help improve quality of life and your property value. Beyond that, this is where it gets a little fuzzy, where they become little mini government entities, and there's no control over them. So I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of action this year because, you know, they took care of so much 2 years ago. But it's certainly on the mind of consumers and the Realtor Party. Definitely.
You know, and one of the things we have... 2 individuals have been waiting, and what I want to do right now, if you don't mind, I want to get sort of all of us on air right now. You know, we want to bring John back in and bring Randall back in, and sort of let's have a little conversation. I mean, one of the things, John and Randall, y'all been hearing a lot of what we've been speaking about here over the past couple of segments. John, we'll start off with you. What are some of your comments about what you've been hearing right now, and how does that impact what NAMB is doing?
Well, I can definitely tell you that I absolutely agree. I mean, in order to have a robust economy in this country, we've got to have a robust housing market. And therefore, you know, one of the big concerns is the law of unintended consequences from regulation that's going to drive up the cost of housing and make it more difficult for consumers to buy a home. CoreLogic, a well-respected data firm, estimates that 52% of all loans originated today will not qualify under the qualified mortgage. So what have we got to do about it?
That's scary.
Make sure that we educate our legislators and our regulators to ensure that people still have equal and available access to credit.
I think the law of unintended consequences, though, needs to be shown to our individuals making these policies in Washington.
No, absolutely. And with rates as low as they are, when they do move up, it's only going to get more and more difficult for consumers to own a home, which means what? Lower property values. So we've kind of got a real problem that we've got to try and solve, and we just need to all work together and find a way to do it and educate our regulators and legislators.
And I know that your industry actually just met with legislators, I believe, last month for your Hill visits in D.C., and the Realtor Party will be going in May to visit in D.C. On these issues as well. And I'd like to see more coordination between our two industries on that so that we're one voice.
Absolutely, and kind of funny, I mentioned the HR 1077 before, and we've been working very closely with the realtors, the mortgage bankers, the home builders, the title companies to get this bill, help to get it drawn up and promoted. I can tell you for the first time in all my years as a mortgage professional, you have the realtors, the mortgage brokers, the mortgage bankers, the home builders. Everybody is on the same side of this issue, and that is consumers have got to be able to have equal and affordable access to credit.
Absolutely. I would absolutely agree. And that's something right now that's very scary because if you look at what's going on, you look at what's in store for next year, if we don't get those changes, if TreePack and NAMB and all the organizations don't bond together to make something happen and to get definition in regards to, and that's a key point right there, definition in regards to how it's going to be interpreted going forward, it's going to be a definite different market in 2014.
Yep.
John, what is your market like in San Antonio?
Well, our housing market here is strong. San Antonio is fortunate enough to, we've got a large military population, and San Antonio is a great vacation spot. So our economy is doing pretty good. Again, though, my concern is with the regulation, the impact that's going to have on the first-time homebuyer market,
Right.
in particular that low to moderate income consumer that's out there.
Yeah, well, I love your Riverwalk there, and I know Christy and I have had a margarita
Well,
or two on there.
come on
in the
down
past,
and visit.
when we're there for TAR, which is Texas Association of Realtors. And Christy was talking this morning, and she might add more to this, is, we're having some issues with appraisals, is that our market is we're up 10% in value, but the appraisers are still, are you seeing that in your market?
Yes. And here's, one of the concerns is, how to fix faulty appraisals. And it's not necessarily so much that, we're upset, that an appraisal doesn't come in or meet value. But and again, this is an unintended consequence of too much regulation, is there's really no real rebuttal process to a faulty appraisal. And when I say faulty, I've seen appraisals come back that have wrong room counts, that have less square footage than is really there. And as mortgage professionals, we're not allowed to directly talk with the appraisers anymore.
Right. Well, that was an unintended consequence to protect the consumers, of course, is to remove the relationship between the appraiser and the lender. And it has, in the beginning, had naturally consequences where people would come in from other cities and do appraisals in our town, and they'd be off, 20%.
Yeah.
And, one of the things, we are going to be coming up against a bit of time on this. I want to get some parting comments from everybody. We'll start off with Randall. You've been quiet right there. Randall, some parting comments, and then more importantly, how we can reach you from NACSO perspective.
Right. Wow, they had such great information. I couldn't jump in, and I agree with both your callers there. We have to join together, which we all spend a lot of our time, and it's all volunteer. No one pays us to go there, and on my part, I can only say because we're
my
not
part as well.
So, kudos to that, because it shows how passionate you guys are, and I feel the same way. I would like to part with giving the website to someone who thinks they might need the assistance of a credible credit repair company. That website is NACSO, and that's NACSO.org, and that's O-R-G. There's a statewide map. Then click on it and see the different organizations that are registered with NACSO. Really quick, just the process we go to in approving those people. We look at all their documentation, ensure it follows all the rules, make sure they aren't saying something they can't do, misrepresenting what they can or can't do. So that the companies that are on there, we go through a rigorous process to be approved, and they must have all the state requirements and bonds.
Excellent.
Randall, thank you very much, buddy. Hey, John, how can we reach NAMB?
Well, I was just going to say, for my closing comments and thoughts here real quick, I was just going to say, number one, home buying today can be difficult, but you can get through it. Lenders aren't asking for more paperwork because they want to. It's because they have to. There's a lot of great mortgage professionals in the Houston area, and if you go to www.namb.org, then you can look up and just type in Houston, Texas, and a list of all the mortgage professionals that support their trade association.
Excellent.
John, thank you very much. How about TreePack?
TexasRealestate.gov, and just know that we have your back, consumers. We're watching out for you. Your realtors are more than just a pretty face, and we're working hard.
Thank you very much. For all those, we appreciate you tuning in today. Again, you can reach us at the Real Estate Rat Pack Show on Facebook. Give us a like. We want to hear from you. Thank you very much.
We're out.
The question is, who's Frank, who's Sammy, who's Dean, and who's the other guy?
Chris is Frank,
I'm
he's
Dean.
Dean, and I'm Sammy.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So tune in to the really big show every Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on 100.7 The Word, KKHT.